In part 1, we learned that readers build fantasy worlds, not writers, and that they do so through fragments. In part 2, I want to look at how we as writers build these fragments without actually stopping our stories. Take the following 2 sentences, both meant to build a fragment of a world. Arathian horses were famous for their ability to sense danger, and their riders learned, often through pain, that they needed to be just as alert. Sentence 2, the horse's decision to run began as a ripple through its haunches, and then, a blink later, I was falling through air, watching the Arathian's rear legs churning over rotten wheat. How would you compare these 2 sentences in terms of how they build a world? Sentence 1 is pure exposition, and that's not inherently a bad thing. But let's compare it to sentence 2. In sentence 2, we connect the world building to the specific action the character is performing. In a vacuum, without any other context, these sentences might not appear that different. But perhaps the most important consideration is how you could follow up or frame your world building after these 2 sentences. Imagine if you wanted to convey more information about Arathian horses. Well, that would be an easy and natural follow-up to sentence 2, because it would be grounded and relevant to the action of the story. This is exactly what people mean when they say, weave your world into your story. You are literally building the world into your sentences. On the flip side, if you tried to relate a history of Arathian horses after sentence 1, what would happen? You'd very much risk the classic info dump that we see all the time in fantasy writing. You'd be choosing to stop your story in favor of purely delivering information about the world. So, how do you actually connect action and world building? Well, the short answer is point of view. And that's exactly what I want to look at with the next passage of The Will of the Many. So let's jump in and see how James Islington uses this very technique. I'm going to leave the first section of The Will of the Many on the screen for a moment, just in case you want to pause to read it again. But now that we've taken care of that, let's dive into the next section. I ignore his worry and assess the foundation board, calculating what the new red formation on the far side means. A feint, I realize immediately. I ignore it. Shift 3 of my white pieces in quick succession and ensure the win. Hrolf likes to boast about how he once defeated a Magnus Quartus, but against me it's never a fair match. Even before the hierarchy or the Catanan Republic, as I still have to remind myself to call them out loud, ruled the world, Foundation was widely considered the perfect tool for teaching abstract strategic thinking. My father ensured I was exposed to it young, often, and against the very best players. Hrolf glowers at the board, then me, then at the board again. Lost concentration. You took too long. Basically cheating, he mutters, disgusted as he concedes the game. You know I beat a Magnus Quartus once. My reply is interrupted by a hammering at the thick stone entrance. Hrolf and I stand, game forgotten. Our shift isn't meant to change for hours yet. The first thing I notice is the reference to the hierarchy. Now, we don't yet know what the hierarchy is, we just get a detail that they prefer to be called the Catanan Republic. And from the way Vis talks about it, it seems like there's real punishment if you don't call them the Catanan Republic out loud, if you use the term hierarchy. So notice how instead of getting details about what the hierarchy actually is, we actually get a tangential fact about them. Now, why does the story do this when it would be clearer to just know what the hierarchy is or find some way to give us those details of how it works right now? Is this James Islington meticulously deciding what the reader needs to know and when? Most likely not. It's usually not that complicated. The reason that we get this particular detail about the hierarchy or the Catanan Republic is because this is what Vis is experiencing in the moment. He's thinking about the hierarchy, and that reminds him that he needs to call them the Catanan Republic. I get a lot of questions about how to know when to give the reader various details of your fantasy world. And the answer is that the reader should be getting details based on what the character is going through in the fictive present. In other words, what's happening to the character right now? What are they doing? What are they contending with? To what do they have to respond? Another way to think about this is, what would your point of view character think about the world in this moment in the narrative? Because any details that the character wouldn't think about in this moment are extraneous, and the details they would think about become your fragments. So in this moment, Vis wouldn't think about what the hierarchy actually is. He wouldn't think about the definition of it, but he would in this moment think about what to call it because he has to be careful to call it the right thing. It has a noticeable effect on his life right now. It's a real threat. Because your reader is constantly building the world through your point of view character, anything in the world that affects your point of view character helps your reader build that world. This is one of the most important parts of building a world on the page. We don't experience a world as a reader except through a point of view. We need the main character's filter and experience to experience the fantasy world ourselves. Because the actual fictional world here is not just floating in space, it's in the mind of a character who's trying to navigate their reality. So now that we understand this principle, what are some actionable steps that we can take when we're writing our stories? How do we get these fragments into our worlds? First, you have to inhabit your point of view character. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't do this. This is not just about world building. This is a big part of storytelling. But rather than simply being in your character's mind and body, I want you to think about and imagine the action that they're going through in the moment in the scene. Imagine what they're doing. What action are they performing? If they're eating an apple, they're going to be in a vastly different mindset and paying attention to vastly different details than if they're riding a horse. And now that you're inhabiting your point of view character and you're imagining what action they're performing, now comes the fun part. And this is what I call your artistic challenge. This is the term that I use when you have to perform a writing task within a very strict set of rules. I'm going to go deeper into this at another time, but for now, the important part is that you have a very specific artistic challenge in front of you. And your artistic challenge here is to find or discover or invent a detail that connects your character's action to something in the larger world. It needs to connect both the action and the world. The detail cannot be purely about the action, and it cannot be purely about the world. It has to bridge the gap between both. So like the example we saw with sentence 2, Arathian horses is connected to the action in the moment of riding a horse. Sentence 2 does not simply describe riding a horse. It adds a detail, Arathian, in order to connect a piece of the world to the action in the moment. And this also prepares the reader in case we want to add more information after this sentence. So your reader is going to take the details that you've created and connected to the action of the story, and they're going to use those details to build the world in their own head. And if you're weaving everything together, all of the details that you include are going to be a lot more immersive and a lot more memorable because they are now tethered to the point of view character. And your reader is also tethered to the point of view character, which means that if the details you choose come from the point of view character's point of view, it allows the reader to build the world from that same perspective. It becomes this really strong and really fun point of connection between you and your reader. So next up, I'm going to look at the process of how to choose details, specifically how to choose details that ground your reader in both your scene and your fantasy world.